Okay, good morning. So we are up to Siman Reish Nun Dalet Sivov. We said yesterday that you can't put a raw dough into the oven just before Shabbos, because there's also the same concerns of Shem Yechata that you might come to stoke it and to try and accelerate the baking. That is the concern. Now, what if you did it? So this is Sivov, very, very interesting Sif. Let's say a person did it. He put it in the oven. So yesterday we spoke about if he did it b'shegeg or mezid before Shabbos. Now this sif is saying, what if you actually did it on Shabbos? A guy came along, he wanted some good challah, and he put some dough in the oven on Shabbos. So the shaila is, can you come along and peel off the dough, take it out of the oven, which is an issur of Redias Apas, which is an issur of Drabonon, you haven't done anything min HaTorah, to save somebody else performing a more serious crime? That's really the shaila. So let's take a look. Very interesting halacha. The guy puts it in the oven, even b'mezid, on Shabbos. He is allowed to take it off. Lirdos means to peel it off the oven. This is the oven back in the day. Before it bakes, because if he leaves it there, then the bread is going to bake, and he'll be over the issur of skila, which is of course much worse than the issur of redias hapas, of peeling off the dough from the oven wall. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah. So you've got another test. Afidu b'mezid. Tahava mina. I might have thought Haliteu l'rosha v'yomus, the famous line. It's a Mishnah in Zeraim. Haliteu l'rosha v'yomus. Let the rosha hang and die. In other words, he violated an issur of putting the dough in the oven on Shabbos. So we don't allow him, maybe I would have thought, to peel it off. Kamash Milan Deshari, actually it is allowed. V'cholshkein k'shehidbik b'shegeg Deshari. And certainly if he put it there b'shegeg, kadei shelo yovel de issur chatos, because if he would have put it there b'shegeg, then the issur is not skila, the issur is a shegeg, it's a chatos. If you look at 27, he says, in many situations, Chazal were omeid al divreihem. They did insist on their drabonans, even b'makom deraisa. Kalsa b'makom avram she'kamoikein motzinu b'harbe mekomes she'lo hamidas divreihem. Sometimes they do, sometimes they didn't. So, how do you know what to do? He makes the distinction. When the Chazal say, don't do this, so when do they say no? You got to keep to the drabonans. That he says as follows: if the two situations have two different sources, if they're two situations, they're not related to each other, then Chazal generally are mamid on the issur drabonon, even if it means violating issur deraisa. Mashein came k'sheshnei ha'isurim inyonim echot. If, however, the two things relate to one aspect, could go in kan, like here, sheshnei ha'isurim hem inyan Shabbos. They're both violations of Shabbos. Baking on Shabbos and doing redias hapas, peeling off the dough from the oven wall, is also a Shabbos halacha. Shemimonavshach yavar is a Shabbos. Either way, we're talking about violations of Shabbos. But often kazeh lo hamidu Chazal es divreim b'makom issur Torah. In this situation, Chazal won't be omed on their divreim. They won't insist on their way in a place of issur Torah. V'omru she'odiv she'yavar issur drabonon me'ashal issur Torah. And therefore they say better to violate the drabonon of redias hapas than to violate cooking or baking on Yom Tov, which of course is an issur deraisa. Okay, continues the Mishnah Berurah Sif Koton Mem. So we say that if a person went ahead and put some dough on the oven wall, b'mezid on Shabbos, we allow him to do the drabonon of redias hapas. Says the Mishnah Berurah, dafka loy, rotzolema dafka hu ba'atzma mutzal lirdos. Aval acherim, but another person, asurim lirdos b'shviloi. So if Reuven comes along and puts the dough on the oven wall, and if you're left there, it's going to become a proper baked challah, and therefore it's going to be over this skila. Reuven is allowed to take it off, but Shimon can't do it for him. Whether Reuven did it b'mezid or b'shegeg, even if he's not here, and we can't say quickly, Reuven, go and take off the dough because it's going to come to an issur skila, or even an issur chatos. It's dafka for Reuven we say that, but for Shimon to violate something in order to save Reuven doing an avera, we don't say you be over an issur drabanan to save your friend a more serious crime. And this is a well-trodden area in halacha. There's a lot to say on this. And that's the key, because chavere posha, and that's the general rule from memory, that if Reuven did it b'pshia, he did it with sort of willingly, knowingly, then we say to him, okay, you got to face the consequences, and we don't get somebody else to violate a lesser crime. Even with our ovens, where there's no real issur ridui, because that's just not how we bake nowadays. We say, the Eli Rabbi says that still it's also for another person to take the dough out of the oven. If you just look at the first line in 29, that if the person himself put it in modern ovens where there's no redias hapas, you're just literally taking the dough out of the oven. So for the individual who violated it himself, we allow him to take it out, but not an acher. Why? Says Mishnah Berurah, because what's the issue? In other words, if you're taking a dough out of a contemporary oven, there's no redias hapas. So what exactly is the problem? Teretz is the dough in its current unbaked state is muktzah. And they can't be touched. Now that is true regarding baking. When it comes to cooking, because if somebody put a pot on the stove, whether it was by accident or on purpose, there's no issur to take it off the stove. With the dough is muksa, so you're telling the person to be over drabanan or touching muksa. But just the basilica gedera ain't kan issur klal. Removing a pot from a flame, you're not doing anything wrong, and therefore for sure you should do that. On the contrary, there is a mitzvah to be mafrishim to prevent him from doing an issur. Lirdois, Mishabur Memalef, Afilu B'mirdo, even if you use this spatula thing that we spoke about yesterday, especially, like a thin, like you have in the matzah baker is, one of those sort of implements, even if you use that, but if you can do a shinuk, going out of the sakin, so long as it won't cause a delay, just get on with it, because if you dither and wait too long, then it could crust up, and therefore he's going to be over the issur of baking. So, just to summarize this sif, that a person, we're talking about putting a dough in an oven before Shabbos and the problems of shehiyah, and previously we spoke about if you put it there, that was in sif hey yesterday. However, today, sif vav, we're talking about where the person actually did it on Shabbos itself. So here we say, we say for the Reuven who puts it in before Shabbos, b'mezid or b'shegeg, we allow him to take it off, to take it out, to prevent him doing an issur skila. What about another person? So the other person, we don't say that. Acherim, we say asurim lirdos b'shvilai, because we don't say asay chet kal kadei shelo v'chavercha l'dei issur chamer. We don't say you violate a small chet to prevent your friend doing a more serious issur. That's and the small issur is either a diasapas, and even in our contemporary ovens, there's still an issur because it's muktzah. If, however, the person be'issur puts a pot on a flame on Shabbos to cook, even b'meiz b'shegeg, we can take it off because there's no issur involved there whatsoever. You're just taking a flame, a pot off a stove. That's not a problem. Okay, good. Siv Zayin. But sanurim shalanu she'ein bohem redia. Now, in our ovens where there's no redia, like we just said, you're allowed to take off bread which is more than needed for 3 meals, besakin b'shinu, in other words, with a knife, or b'shum dava sheyitchov by, or anything else that you can sort of stick into it to put it off the oven wall. Omikol makom lo yotzi berachas. You shouldn't use a specialized instrument, mishum demechzik uvdin depachtuchal, because it looks like a weekday activity. Says the Mishnah Berurah Membes, she'ein bohem redia. To b'meleches redia shayach rak batzanorehem Radia is specifically if you have that type of oven where you take the dough and you sort of slap it on the inside wall of the oven, like in Taboon or one of these places. But that's not our ovens nowadays. You just bake it in a regular way on the base of the oven. Lo shaykh bohem radia is not shaykh radia. Mem gimel lehaitzi Yosef. Kosam Magen Avram tahainu k'shehidbik beheta. We're talking about a situation where you put the dough in an acceptable way, in a heta way. The betanurim shelohem hayu also lehaitzi kol hapas she'ein tzorech le'tzorech Shabbos, because in their ovens that we don't allow you to take out more than you need for Shabbos. For chanal b'sifhei, like we said yesterday, afilu al deshinui, even with a shinui. Masha'en ken b'shelonu to lo shaykh rudia. It's not shaykh rudia with our ovens. Mutar lehaitzi kol hapas. You can take out the whole lot. Afshu harbe, even if it's more than you need, lots of it. Harbe yosem shalosh sudas, and more than shalosh sudas shetzorech le'Shabbos. Avol kol zeh kasherot lechol mehem b'Shabbos. But you can only do that if you actually want to eat from these breads. Al kol ponim mixas mehem, or even some of them. Because otherwise you're doing it, you're putting it in the freezer and you're taking it for Sunday. That's not allowed. And therefore even touching it is going to be also if you're doing so for the weekday. You can't be meichim from Shabbos to Motzei Shabbos. You can't bring wine on Shabbos for drinking on Motzei Shabbos. And Yehudi Shari, it appears, says Mishnah Berurah, that would be allowed. With a sefer Eli Rabbi mekel al yidei atzmai b'tanurim shelanu b'mokum pseida she'iskalkel hapas. If it's considered the mokum hefsed in our ovens where there's no redias hapas, then the Eli Rabbi allows it. Magen Avram lo nichale b'zeh. He's not happy with that. Tahari yochel lechol min hapas b'Shabbos, because you can eat, and therefore b'mokum she'ikalkel you shouldn't do it. You can sort of stab something in. So too you can take a stick or something. Because as long as you don't use the regular spatula, this is all considered the shinu, and therefore it's okay. For a non-Jewish person, you can use even the specialized instrument for who klisha onomotziin b'apas b'chol, and that's the thing that we use to use during the week to peel off the bread from the oven. Okay, good. Ches. Lo yemale odem kadeir asosio. So we came across this yesterday. So we've been talking about, on Sif Hey, we spoke about putting the bread in the oven before Shabbos. Now we're talking about not meat or things like that, but rather vegetables. Putting that on a flame before Shabbos. So lo yemale odem kadeir asosios. Don't fill your pot with asosios, says the brackets. Pirush minik nias hagdulos. Hagdelis Beretz Yisrael, V'lo Bavel, some type of bean that is grown in Eretz Yisrael, not in Bavel. V'turmasin, also another type of vegetable. V'yitzin l'seicha taner erev Shabbos saman chachashecha. Don't put these vegetables in a pot close to Shabbos, because these things don't need a lot of cooking. And you can eat them already, quickly into Shabbos on Friday night. And therefore, even though they're not fully cooked before Shabbos, this is your classic example of something which is not fully cooked, and this is a problem of shehiyah. And therefore, v'huadin, l'kira, v'kupach, and these types of ovens, hagar, k'she'enim grufim v'ktumim v'efshel lachtes, and the problem is you might come to mimachata. V'im also kein afilu b'sheigeg, and if you went ahead and did it, even b'sheigeg, asur n'motzei Shabbos at kadesh yasu. So you got to wait until Motzei Shabbos, the time it takes to cook. Says the Mishnah Berurah, asosius v'turmesin, v'huadin l'shar minei kitnias, v'yerokos v'dvarim rakim, and love dafka these beans, but all types of vegetables and these things which cook fairly quickly. Shekulam einam domin lebasar, they're different to meat. To kaiman on le'el, but Reishim and Reishim Gimel, the mutar litnei somech lechashech k'shel chai. Because previously in Reishim Gimel we said that you can put raw meat immediately before Shabbos, because meat takes a long time to cook. It won't be ready for Friday night, and therefore there's no concern of shemichata. And when it comes to eating the chulent or whatever it is on Shabbos morning, you've left it for 12 hours or whatever it is overnight, you're going to be okay. But these vegetables or beans or whatever they are, that is a concern of Shem Yechatze, because that would be tempting to eat it for Friday night. L'teicha tanur, hainu afilu hu gar for kotzim. Even if the tanur is gar for kotzim, you've taken out the coals, or you've added ash to the coals. Kamesha kotzim v'simulation gimel sif aleph. Miu tanuri didan, for our types of ovens, the domi lakira the shari gar for kotzim. If it's gar for kotzim, we allow it. V'imu tuach batid try b'cholin, and if it's sealed, then there's no problem. Kafim asher kotzim v'aramah b'sif aleph b'hagah. Kashe'enu grufim akira levadkoi, that's going on the kira. For nokal oshin rabbi makira de la alma. The ilu kupach halu mavu bereish nugimah de siku beizim lo mahani grif v'ktima, it won't even help. Kadesh ye'osu, kadesh lo yehana mehen mimashe oval issur drabonon, because you got to wait kadesh ye'osu, you shouldn't get benefits from the violation of an issur drabonon. Va'enel b'sim reish nugimah sifalev v'gago nispashim boydem k'maycha ben drusoi. It's interesting, just by the way, we mentioned previously in Sif Kotan Namad Gimel, in Sif Hey yesterday, we said that we made a difference between shaking and mazid. That we said if you put the bread in before Shabbos, if you did it b'mazid, you're stuck. But if you did it b'shegeg and you were over the issur of shehiyah, then we allow you to take out mozen shalosh su'udus. But here we don't make a distinction between mazid and shegeg. And the Mishnah Berurah previously in Lamed Gimel yesterday said that the difference is because there's no chiyuv to eat this bowl of beans or whatever. So don't eat the beans. Have something else to eat. Mashain came the challahs you need for the mozen shalosh su'udus. So therefore we said b'shegeg we would allow it. Okay, let's just finish off the siman, a short siftes. K'yoyt siboy. Similarly, lo yemale choves shel mayim. You shouldn't fill a barrel of water, v'yitain l'toicha tanur, and put it in the oven erev Shabbos im chashecha, because again you might accelerate it and you want hot water on Shabbos. If you went ahead and did it, then it would be also chadesh yasud and on after Motzei Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, memtes shel mayim afagav the mayim ru'uyin nishtes chaim. Even though you can drink the water raw, i.e. cold, for your royal lios dinam kaperes anechalim chaim, and therefore they should have the same status as raw fruit that we said le'el b'sif daled mikol mokum enum tovim kol kach kaperes. But because we said previously with fruit, there's no concern of shemi yechatze, because you can eat it raw, so you won't eat it. You won't stoke it to be over an issur to have it baked. But here with water, with water, it's nice. You want to have a hot drink, and therefore there is the gezerah of chitui, and therefore you shouldn't put this barrel of water in the oven before Shabbos because of shehiyah. But of course, if the oven is gar v'kotum, or it's tuach batit, it's sealed, and therefore there's no concern of chitui, then it would be okay. Now, erev Shabbos im chashecha, elim kein yeshahus sheischam mukedim ben hashmashas. So you've got to make sure that it's put in early enough that it would have warmed up before ben hashmashas, before shkia. After yeischam kol tzarek, and even though it might not be bubbling and boiling, but it's warm to some degree, that's going to be enough. V'chein also litin mayim l'teicha kader shebetanur erev Shabbos im chashecha. You can't put kaderas in the in the oven on erev Shabbos, as it gets close to Shabbos. Afagav the mischaven rak shlo yifka kadera. Even though your intention is not to drink the water, just so that the pot shouldn't burst by being exposed to the heat without anything in it. Because of the heat of the oven. And therefore there's no concern of yechete because you're not drinking the water. Since this is the way of rinsing pots, they've got to just be sure that it's warmed up to some degree, but miktas from erev Shabbos, and therefore there's no problem. Seder. Okay.